Welcome to Level Up Tribes. Level Up Tribes provides resources to help you attain the necessary resources to level up your mind, body, and soul and realize your full potential. It is about exploring, learning, providing you with the tools from the experts for you to create a better version of yourself. I am your host, Agnes Goodwine, and welcome, Tribes. Co-parenting is one of those challenging issues that come up after a divorce or separation. The struggles of co-parenting can produce enormous stressors for those who are separated, divorced, or sharing custody. Every decision parents make during a separation can affect a child's behavior, attitude, and self-esteem. Today, Dr. Cristy Lopez joins us again to talk about co-parenting, the do's and don'ts, and provide you with resources to help you through your co-parenting journey. Welcome back, Dr. Cristy.
Thank you, and thank you for having me back.
You're welcome. It's always a pleasure to have you here for you to share your knowledge.
Yeah, I like our discussions.
Yes, it's always so powerful. Let's get started. Let's talk about co-parenting. And with your history of counseling couples and individuals, what is the actual definition of co-parenting?
So co-parenting is when you are raising a child or children with the other parent when the parents are divorced or separated.
What are some of those challenges you see when it comes to co-parenting?
So there's actually a lot of challenges just in general when it comes to parenting. And so there can be like an added layer on top of it when you are doing co-parenting, but many of them are the same. So some of the similar problems, whether you're together or no longer together, can be things like having different parenting styles. So that's a very common one where each parent has their own idea about how they think this goes. Communication difficulties.
Yes.
Unfortunately, a lot of people don't have the best or greatest skills on how to effectively communicate. And then especially if you've already kind of gone through a divorce or separation, it's probably highly likely you were having communication problems about multiple things. Part of them could be, about parenting. So communication difficulties in general is also a common thing. Expressing anger about the other parent to your child or children, either directly or indirectly. I know a lot of people don't necessarily intend to do that, but it just comes out. Yes. So that's whether you're still with your other, your partner or not. A lot of people will do that either consciously or kind of subconsciously. So that's another thing that comes up a lot. Or even if you're together, one parent may not be willing to parent. Okay. Or one parent may not be able to parent, or one or both. So, and then when you go through a divorce or a separation, there tends to be a lot of like anger, frustration, disappointment, like a lot of these feelings. And it kind of sometimes prompts one of the parents to maybe kind of pull back or disappear. So either not being available or not even knowing how to parent. So those are things that can happen whether you're together or not. Some of the ones that are a little bit more uniquely to if you're divorced or separated is if you're divorced or separated, you're highly likely not living with each other anymore.
Right.
So now you have the added issue of we're not in the same physical space. Sometimes it gets to the degree where there's such frustration and negative feeling between the partners where they don't even want to talk to each other in person anymore. So they may just insist on like texting or emailing, or I've seen it and I've had it be to the extent of where they will not communicate with the other parent unless it's through lawyers. So trying to get things done, especially on a daily basis when you're not even physically present or really having opportunity for communication or communication without a third party, that just adds a whole other layer on top of it. Anything court ordered adds another entirely layer on top of this, because who has custody? Is it joint? Is it sole? Who can make decisions for what? So parenting in general is difficult.
Yes.
And then you add this on top of it, it tends to make it even more difficult.
So question for you, Dr. Cristy, for example, if you have a couple that is going through their challenges and they know that there's no end to it, that this is going to be a breakup. Mm-hmm. And so what do you suggest for those individuals that are going to go through that? Do you suggest creating a co-parenting plan prior to the problems even getting worse? Or, give us a tip on they're going through their issues. They know that there's no fixing it. Mm-hmm. What can they do at that moment?
Yeah. So actually, this is kind of similar in that even parents who are together should have a co-parenting plan.
That's true.
Okay. Parenting really shouldn't just be a seat of the pants kind of thing.
That's true.
And the couple should have had discussions on this long before the kids were even conceived.
Yes.
But then once, they are, yes, it is definitely recommended that all parents have a co-parenting plan, which requires communication, effective communication, and a plan that they both consciously, deliberately come to together, because the parents need to be on the same team. The parents need to act as a unit. So all parents actually could probably benefit from that.
Yes.
But if you have not, and then it kind of comes up because you are actually knowing that you're about to split or divorce. Now, it depends on if you're married or not. If you're going to divorce, I think the courts actually require it. So, so you probably will actually formally have to have a co-parenting plan for that. But if you're not married and you're separating, you still may want to do that, because as difficult as it probably was to co-parent when you were together, it's going to be even more so when you're not together. So it definitely would be recommended to have co-parenting plans from the get-go, or whenever you realize, hey, this would be helpful.
What would be in the plan?
So it depends on if this is a formal co-parenting plan or not, like with the courts. And then that, I think, is dictated by the state. So you have to kind of look into your state laws, and then the court will let you know. And I think they pretty much can give you like a template, or there's certain things that you have to go through. I also think you have to go through certain like online classes and things like that. So depending on what state you're in, it may be kind of drawn out for you. But if you weren't married, or you decide to more go through like a mediator, I think there's more flexibility there. So sometimes it ranges. So it can be kind of on the minimal side, which is more about custody. So it's more of a custody agreement. So the type of custody, sole, joint, that kind of thing. The parenting time schedule. So that's like, where are the kids on a daily basis, on holidays, on vacations? So it's kind of like the physical presence of where the kids are. Can you travel? Can you relocate with the child? How is the custody going to be exchanged? Like, who's doing it? Where is it? How does it get done? And then the financial information, like child support, and who's paying for what, who can claim children as dependents. What if you pay for something? Do you get reimbursed? Like, so sometimes there's more minimal, and it's kind of more around the custody part of things, but they do have more elaborate and comprehensive co-parenting plans that are a little bit more about actually kind of outlining the more parenting part of how are you going to continue to care and provide for your children now that you guys are separated. So there's actually a lot of things that this can entail. Go ahead.
And I'm pretty sure, because it could be a legal document, that it will have to be notarized by both parties. If that's, we're not attorneys, but I'm assuming that would.
Yeah, if it's official, it's part of the court record, so it will be something more formal like that. If it is not, then that would be a good idea, is to have it notarized or signed or something like that. Would be helpful. Because it can be very detailed. Like, it can spell out the, how you're going to raise your children, basically, both of you guys. How are you going to discipline? What food or diet are they going to have? The daily routines, a bedtime routine. Can people smoke or drink in front of them? Who can live in the household? Who's going to take care of the kids when you're busy? And if you're, if it's your time to have the kids, but you're going to work, are you hiring a babysitter? And if so, who? Or can I, write a first refusal? Like, could the other parent watch them instead, even though it's not their time? Who has decision-making authority? Who's going to take them to the doctor? Who can tell the doctor yes or no, or give consent for treatment? Who has access to records? Even things of participating in sports. What school do they go to? I mean, what religion? Can they even have it is everything. Who's going to take care of the kids when they're sick and have to be home? What kind of extended family can be involved or not be involved? It can even be very specific things like, hey, we have to promise that we are not going to disparage each other or say negative things about each other, that we're going to be encouraging the relationship between us. I mean, so you can also put like those kinds of things in them. They can really be pretty elaborate and detailed.
And it sounds minor, but it could be so important, because you never know what can happen. One of the parents, can die, and you have that document to say, what, this is what we both chose for our children. So at some point, it is a very important thing to do. If the communication between the parents is not effective or healthy, would you suggest a mediator? And what would a mediator help with? And how is that different from obtaining a family counseling?
Okay, so sometimes people, they do like a traditional divorce and have lawyers and things like that. You can also go the mediation route, and then sometimes either will involve having a family counselor or couples counselor or something like that. So the mediation, that's more like a, hey, we have a specific problem like right now. So maybe there's something like we have a disagreement now about something to do with custody, or we have a disagreement now that has something to do with the financial support or whatever it is. So it's kind of like a more focused and kind of a quick, supposedly quick resolution process, where this third party mediator is guiding them through like a formal process and trying to keep it calm and trying to keep it focused and trying to make sure that each party is listening to each other. And then that usually will result in a written agreement that usually then is also part of the court record. So it's a very focused, kind of more quick problem solving type procedure. Okay, now family counseling is usually a longer process, and it can also involve the child or their children. And then that is more focusing on the relationships between everyone. So improving the relationships between the parents, improving even parent-child relationship. That is not usually part of the court record. So there's and it takes longer. It's usually a process kind of thing.
Thank you for sharing that. What would be the best communication practice between parents?
Okay, so
this one is probably going to take a minute.
Yeah. Unfortunately, a lot of people have communication difficulties. We're not really formally taught on how to effectively communicate. And people usually just kind of learn from how they were raised. So there's a lot that goes into having effective communication, and then effective communication between parents. So there are things that, co-parenting requires having empathy, patience, and open communication, things that usually when you were together were probably not present, which was causing part of the issues or the problems. And it takes communication skills. So the same thing, most likely if people are having relationship problems, they are having difficulties in those areas of being patient, being able to have empathy for each other, being able to understand and hear each other, being able to effectively communicate, not doing a lot of the things that destroy relationships, like criticizing each other or becoming very defensive or just shutting down or putting the other person down. So there's a lot of ways that people communicate that are destructive to relationships. So it's learning how to not only not do those things, but how to do the effective, healthy things of how you actually listen to a partner, how you don't focus on the other person. You focus on listening and understanding them, but it's not about whether they're right or wrong or judging them. It's about understanding them and then you being able to express yourself so they are, and the idea is that you're both open to understanding each other. So there's a skill involved, and then there is the motivation of you both need to focus that this is in the child's best interest. Yes. It's not about the problems between you two or getting back at each other or trying to prove anything to each other. It is really you both have to focus on the best interest of the child.
Yes.
And unfortunately, a lot of people have a hard time putting their issues with the other person aside to be able to do that.
Yes. And most times, I don't know if this is true, but just based on my personal observation, when you have a couple that are constantly fighting, is because, to me, one of them still have feelings or unsolved something. Mm-hmm. And so they nitpick, through the co-parenting stages, and they have their triggers, and they communicate through being either impulsive or being defensive.
Right.
If a person, whether it's the dad or the mom, is going through that stage where they're hurt,
right,
and they're not putting that child in the forefront, what would you recommend for that individual to do?
Yeah, it would be great. What would really be great, I'm going to back it all the way up, is if people do some formal therapy work before they're even married or before they decide to be together. Okay, yes. So I'm talking going back.
way back.
Okay, yeah. But if not, then once you're together and you realize you're experiencing problems, I think the stat is it takes 6 years before a couple will come in for couples counseling. So wow. 6 years of going through this, that's a long time before they come. And by the time they come, one of them is usually already out. So, we could still work on it, but just imagine if you came, right away, or you even tried to prevent it. Okay, yes. So prevention I work in a business where I'm helping people and intervening and teaching them how to do this, but I'd rather prevent it. Okay.
Yes.
So then once you learn how to intervene on something, you can learn how to prevent future, but hey, why don't we start in the beginning? So anyway, I would suggest that people do therapy before they are together as a couple, before they have children. Once a couple becomes parents, it just introduces a whole other level of issue to deal with, and marital satisfaction will plummet usually.
Yes.
So there's a lot of statistics around what happens when you have a child. So it'd be great if you prepare for that with somebody more professionally and formally so that you're better prepared. And then if not, once you realize there's an issue or something going on, or you're kind of heading down this road where you are separating, then come for that reason. Because again, especially if there's children involved, I always recommend, before you make some life-altering decision, I recommend you do everything possible to really work on it. And I mean like formally, because when I have people come in, I say, what have you done to try and work on this before? And they usually said I was going to work on it. But that's it, because they don't know what to do. If they knew what to do, they wouldn't be having these issues. And there's actually things to do, like through science, through relational science and psychological science, that we know helps strengthen couples or what destroys them. So there's actually formal things to be doing to help this. But most people don't know that. So getting professional help, and then also around parenting, the same thing. Parents will parent just based on what they know, and that may or may not be the most healthy or recommended thing to be doing. And again, there's science on the development of a child's brain and on how to parent children. So being able to take advantage of resources that are out there can benefit on all kinds of levels, because you have child or children involved, and even for yourselves as the parent, because if you do not work on these issues or problems that presented themselves, you will repeat them, but with your next partner, and then the next partner after that, and the next partner after that.
Tell them, Dr. Cristy. Dr. Cristy, what are some problem-solving techniques that you could suggest for parents to implement?
Yeah, so this kind of falls under communication skills, and there are a lot of things to learn on how to better effectively communicate and then also problem solve. So they're connected to each other. Now, what I see a lot is people want to immediately jump to problem solving. So somebody just barely starts to say something, and the other person usually will jump in there and try and solve it for that person. That's usually not the most effective way to go about it. And I actually, like in my practice and with the people I work with, I've had to come up with a pre-problem solving guideline.
Okay.
Because before we can even get to the guidelines of how you try to actually problem solve, there's a whole series of things that need to be done to make it better effective when you are trying to problem solve. So it's called the pre-problem solving guide.
Okay.
So I use this worksheet, and I think we might be able to put a link if people wanted to see what it is. So
Absolutely.
I'll kind of quickly talk about it, but it's more detailed. But a lot of it, again, has to do with understanding your partner. Most things between partners, most issues or whatever comes up, they are actually not going to be able to be solved in a way that has like a nice bow on it and everybody is like 100% happy. Most issues between couples are not going to be solved that way. What you need to do is you need to be able to understand your partner. I cannot emphasize this enough. You don't have to agree with them. You're not trying to judge whether it's right or wrong. You're trying to understand them. Because if you can get to that point of understanding them and have empathy for each other, and this is part of what the pre-problem solving guidelines is talking about, then you can either, one, actually better effectively problem solve because you have a clear understanding and you can collaboratively do this. If you cannot get to an actual compromise or something, but you at least understand what is going on, you will better be able to go ahead and move forward with how do we do this anyway.
Yes.
And that's where most people fall apart, is if they can't get to that part of understanding each other, they cannot move forward.
But Dr. Cristy, to throw a curveball at you real quick, what if that individual has behavior issues, like maybe a narcissist? Can a plan like this actually work?
So that's part of the understanding. So remember, I was saying like it's helpful to understand them, but you don't necessarily have to agree with them or whether it's right or wrong.
Okay.
But if you can understand their perspective, even if it's from I understand their perspective, and that's because it's coming through a lens of narcissism, or because that's how the person is, then you're better equipped to try and deal with it. Okay. It doesn't mean that just because you understand you have to accept it and you have to just like take it for what it is, but you will at least be better equipped to deal with the issue and what's going on. And in something very specific like that, like narcissism, that person is not going to see it like that. Like they most likely will not think that they're being narcissistic about it.
Yes.
So this is also where you also may need more professional help, because how you are as an individual is going to influence how you are as a partner, as a parent. And so this is kind of like what family counseling is about, because and couples counseling is about, is it's dealing with everything. When I have a couple in therapy, the relationship, the couple is the client. And I am working with the individuals because they are influencing the couple. And then I'm working with them as a couple.
Okay.
You cannot work on a couple issue with just one person.
Yes.
Okay. But if that ends up being the case, because the other person either has some sort of issue like what you're talking about, or maybe they have like a substance abuse issue, or they're just actually unable or unwilling to do something, then you have to figure out, okay, now how can I best basically co-parent without the co-part, like without the other person participating or being willing. And that adds a whole other layer of difficulty on all of this.
And I asked that because, I mean, my kids are grown. They're in their late 20s, but their kid's father was a narcissist. And I didn't know what that was. I didn't know what our problem was through our 16-year relationship, until I found out, I'm like, wait a minute, there's something here and I can't pinpoint it. And then I started kind of reading about certain behaviors. And when I understood what I was dealing with, I took that leap to say, you know what, I'm going to have to do this on my own.
Right.
And so that's what I did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's the thing, is that you were able to understand, not that you agreed with it or accepted it or thought it was awesome, but you were able to understand what was going on so that you can make a better decision about what is in the best interest for the children. Right. So great job on recognizing that, and two, doing something about it.
Well, it took 16 years, but yeah.
Better than never.
I know, that's true. Dr. Cristy, there are times when two parents have different parenting styles. To avoid conflict, like what is the best way to manage something like that?
So this happens a lot.
Well, and before you get into that, like one example is I have a friend who he doesn't want their children to get shots.
Oh yeah, vaccinations.
Yes, the vaccinations, but she does.
Right.
And so there's conflict involved, of course, in that. So for something like that, how can you work? How can you find the medium?
Yeah, so some of that is going to depend on whether this is separation, divorce, and if the courts are involved.
Okay.
Because if the courts are involved, there is part of what gets determined is who makes medical decisions. And that would fall under that. So if a parent is given that sole discretion, like if it happens to be her, then it happens regardless. If it happens to be him, then it doesn't regardless. So some of this could be determined by the court.
Okay.
If not, then you could try a mediation, but on something like the example you gave, it's highly likely that there's not going to be an agreement there. So it goes back to the understanding of what's going on each person's side to then see if you can come to something. Now, sometimes you're not going to be able to, but sometimes you can, because if you can understand what the fear is underlying, then you can come up with a problem-solving thing that maybe addresses the fear in a different way than what you were thinking. Okay, this requires a lot more deeper understanding.
Yes. And from what I've heard, the fear, to me, and I could be wrong, sounded more like the vaccinations cause disability with children.
Right. So that is a belief that has been out there. There's lots of research on, and ongoing, but has already come to be, about whether this is really the case or not. And so far, the research is showing that it is not the case. But now you have to go back to who's going to be looking into this stuff, and whether the research says it is or not, you're still going to have your own personal belief. And it could just, I've had it before where it's like, okay, well, the research shows that that's not the case, but if it happens to your child and it just seems to coincide in time with when they got vaccinated, even knowing the research, you could be like a straight up scientist, and even knowing that, you still have your child in this, in this state where you're concerned and they're possibly now different than they were. It would be kind of hard to kind of put the research over your own experience. Yes. But that's actually something I was going to add to this section too, which is beyond the kind of understanding each other and trying to come to some sort of resolution or how we move forward, is to actually consult research or science, because there is research behind parenting practices, behind communication, behind things like whether or not you should vaccinate your children or not.
Yes.
And then on that same issue, besides even just looking at the part of the studies that show whether there's a link between vaccination and then developing like autism or some kind of developmental disability, there's plenty of research that shows what happens when kids are not vaccinated and how they die and or become disabled because of contracting something that they normally would not have. So you also need to look on the other side of research of what happens if you do not.
That's a good point. Thank you for bringing that up.
You're welcome.
When you have an effective co-parenting plan, what are the benefits of the child long term?
Okay, so if the parents comply with the co-parenting plan, you can have an effective co-parenting plan, but if the parents don't do it, it's not going to work. But if they really comply with the co-parenting plan, there should be less conflict and less frustration. And then things should be able to move more smoothly and timely. Things should be able to be predictable and reliable. And that, again, I can't emphasize that enough, because what you're trying to do as a parent, you're trying to do lots of things, but at the base, you're trying to make sure your child feels safe and secure. That's like a base, because if your child feels safe and secure, they usually will have positive development. If they do not, that's when you're now at risk for developing a whole range of things, So you are trying to have your children feel safe and secure so that they could have healthy development. And when you have conflict, frustration, unpredictability, sometimes it's this, sometimes it's that, this person says this, the other person says that, all of that destroys that sense of safety and security, and you're leaving your kids open to be at risk for a number of problems.
Yes. Anxiety.
Yes.
Anger.
Yes.
Anger issues. How important is it for parents to not involve their children in the middle of their conflict and even their family members?
Okay, so this is super critical in so many ways, to not put your kids in the middle of your conflict. And again, it's like people are told this over and over. Yeah. Do not do this. Have your child's best interests at heart. But a lot of times they get so wrapped up in their negative emotions, they don't know how to regulate them, and they cannot control themselves. And it either comes out directly or indirectly. And now we go back to you're putting your children at higher risk for developing a number of problems. I mean, there are problems psychologically that they can end up having behaviorally, physically, socially, relationally, and academically. Like, there's lots of research around what happens and what children can develop with their having a healthy development and have strong sense of security and self-esteem, and how they're able to flourish and thrive. And then on the other side, if they do not have that sense of security and they do not have that sense of safety, and they have this chaos and this conflict and this negative emotions, and parents who do not know how to regulate and show them how to deal with those kinds of things, they are at high risk for multiple problems.
Yes. And even if you're not dealing with, if you're listening and you're not co-parenting, but you are a family member or a friend that is witnessing a bad co-parenting issue, and they're involving you, what would you say to someone for things not to do to help the couple?
Yeah, so this is hard when other people get involved. But if they are coming to you, whoever that third party person is, they need to keep in mind what is the best interest of the child. Okay, especially if they are like a family member of one side.
Okay.
Because if you're the mom of one of the parents, or you're the whatever sister, brother, whatever it is of one of the people, it will be highly likely that you're going to want to, understandably take that person's side and then go against the other.
Yes.
That is not a good way to go about it.
Yes.
The person they also need to kind of put their own personal feelings aside, and even put their feelings aside about their own sibling or child or whoever this is, and put the child's interest first and support the child's interest. And then try to support the couple as a unit, but that means the couple has to be a unit. And a lot of times that's where the issue is the couple does not know how to be a unit. So then you can suggest, that they do get some formal help, and then just as best you can try and support them in the way that where you're communicating to the whoever this is that it's ultimately for the interest of the child, and that's really what they just need to keep coming back to.
How can a parent heal from his or her emotional pain? And we discussed this a little bit throughout the interview, but if you can go a little deeper.
So there's kind of two primary routes. A lot of times people don't even address it or realize it, and they may just be kind of moving forward and not doing anything about it, and or kind of self-medicating. And usually if you're self-medicating, you're actually usually causing more problem than not. And you can self-medicate in lots of ways. So that can be like a drug issue or an alcohol issue, an eating issue, a spending issue, a gambling issue, even relationships, like going from relationship to relationship. So people do these things that are not in their best interest, but it is a way that they are trying to self-medicate or self-soothe or do something to try and help them with all of this negative emotional pain that they're having, versus actually either formally, like with professional help, looking and processing in a healthy way and then figuring out how to cope better and do things differently. Or if you don't go to a professional, which would actually be the most recommended, there's a lot of self-help books, courses, and things out there. You just have to be careful with what you're reading and who you're going to, because sometimes that person may be giving advice, or the book may be giving advice that is actually the thing that is worse to do or makes it worse. So you really need to be on top of it in terms of where is this coming from, and is it based in science or research? Because then hopefully you have a better chance that this is actually the direction or the thing to do to help. But you have to be self-aware first. You have to be willing, and then it takes work. So just like the co-parenting plan, it takes work to make one up, but it takes even more work to actually comply and do it. Same thing when you're working on yourself. You can even go to a professional, but if you don't do the work, it's not going to change. I have a saying where I say, this is what I tell my clients, I could say the most brilliant thing, and I often do, but if you don't follow it, it's not going to make a difference.
Right. That's so true.
Yeah.
Self-awareness is probably like the most important thing for someone to just take time and be self-aware of what's going on in their life. If there's patterns, get a journal, like start writing this stuff down. And because sometimes, you go through your day and you're so busy and you tend to kind of forget. But then if things are continuous, like happening in your life, that you have to be like, you know what? Maybe it's me. Maybe I'm causing this chaos in my life. And so that self-awareness is so important.
Yeah, and that's where it starts. In order to work on anything, you have to be aware of it. Yes. And then the second part of that is, are you aware of it accurately?
True.
Okay, so
But how would you know it's accurate?
Exactly. And this is one of the main things of when I'm working with people, because our brains have two main tendencies. It has a negativity bias. So our brains are biased to the negative, and our brains are often inaccurate. So our brains have a lot to do. So I'm not trying to pick on the brain, but it's just like our brains have a lot to do. But unfortunately, sadly, in its like mission to be efficient and to keep you alive, it sometimes will do things that are not accurate, and it tends to be negatively biased because your brain is more concerned with keeping you alive versus you actually functioning well.
That is true.
So again, like having a professional person can help you more with how you become self-aware, how you can know whether you are accurately perceiving what's happening, and then how you can learn skills and move on from there.
Yes. Another thing that I wanted to add for our listeners is to kind of know it's so hard to change yourself, let alone as someone else.
Yeah, you can't.
And so kind of keep that in mind, that if you're going through some problems with another individual, another parent, work on yourself first and then on the other person, because more than likely you can't change them.
Yeah. You're not going to be able to.
No.
So even when I have like my couples here together, I say to them, you were responsible for you and you were responsible for you. So like they're each responsible for their own selves. And that's what they need to do, is they need to work on their own selves. And then we will also work on the couple dynamic, but you're part of that couple dynamic because you cannot change someone else.
Yes.
And you definitely can change yourself. And then the other thing I always let them know is don't make it contingent on whether your partner is doing it or not. Because otherwise you're going to stalemate, which is what usually happens.
Yes.
Because they'll be like, well, why am I going to try if my other person's not going to try? And it's very important that you work out of how you want to behave, how you want to be out of your own values. Don't work out of contingent on what the other person is doing or not. Don't let them control how you are being as a person, how you are being as a parent.
Yes.
You have control over yourself. You can do that for yourself. You cannot make somebody anything else.
There you have it. Another golden nugget by Dr. Cristy.
Yes.
I love it. I love it. Do you have any book recommendations about co-parenting that could be helpful to those going through co-parenting issues?
So I did look some books up in preparation for this because when I'm dealing with people, I am helping them and working with them based on kind of the psychological science and the things that are out there, like on a professional level. So I didn't really know too much about what was out there for like the general self-help kind of population. So in looking things up, I did find 3 different books specifically about co-parenting that they were highly recommended, on the online. Okay. But I don't know because I haven't read them myself, but I can tell you the titles of them and then people can kind of do their own research. So there was a book called Mindful Co-Parenting. And then there's another book called Conscious Parent's Guide to Co-Parenting. And then the third book I found was the Co-Parenting Handbook. So of all the ones that I came across, those 3 not only had high ratings, but from what I could tell, it looked like they were referencing psychological science or research behind them. But one book I do recommend to like all my parents, even people who are like babysitting or nannying or anything like that, is a book called No Drama Discipline by Daniel Siegel. Okay. And the reason why I recommend this No Drama Discipline is because it's very neuroscience based. So it really gets into the developing mind of the child, and it talks about your own mind. And so that you can understand, so it goes back to understanding. So you can understand what's going on for your child at what developmental age, what's going on for yourself, and how you can help yourself, like, again, regulate your own emotions, how you can self-soothe, because you need to actually be teaching your children how to do these things. But you need to know how to be able to teach them at the appropriate developmental level. So No Drama Discipline is a book I highly recommend to anyone who's dealing with children.
Okay, that's awesome. Thank you. Is there anything else that you would like to add or discuss that perhaps we didn't touch on today?
I think we covered a lot. I think the only thing I remember that I didn't necessarily bring up that I was going to had to do with when you do have this situation of co-parenting because there is a divorce involved or there's the separation of the couple involved, you have another whole layer of other people possibly becoming involved in terms of a new partner coming in on the scene.
Yes.
As either like an actual step parent or just an influencer. So I think I forgot to mention that part in one of the things that you asked me, because that is pretty big, because when you're together, you may not be, co-parenting the best, but it's usually just you two involved in parenting the kids. When you are divorced or separated, now you can introduce not only one, but 2 possible people, and beyond the 2, if somebody ends up like serially dating or having other people, you can end up having numbers of third-party people coming in on the scene, either acting as a parent or influencing a parent. So that's another whole issue to deal with.
I didn't even think about the third party deal.
Yeah.
Any tips on maybe add that to the plan?
Yes. So that could be, I think I may have mentioned that, I'm not sure, but that could be part of the parenting plan, which is because I think I said the part about like who can even live in the house if someone else can live in the house, because if someone else is involved with someone, are they going to be living there? And then now I'm going to add another layer onto it, because not only can it be another partner comes in on the scene, but what if that partner now has kids? And now you're introducing
oh my God, yes.
siblings in onto this. You
have to be prepared.
Yeah. And especially if there's a big age difference between them.
Yes.
If you and your partner have like a 3-year-old girl, And now all of a sudden somebody decided to be with someone who has, a partner who has like 4 teenage boys.
Yes.
Or just,
And just listening to you and you providing all these scenarios that could happen, and they do happen.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It goes back to what you said. If you're not self-aware
Mm-hmm.
and you're continually doing the same mistakes,
Right.
if you do get another partner and the issues continue with that partner,
Right.
then you're adding on.
Yes. Yeah. So they're seeing multiple models of the same dysfunction.
Yes.
And what we'd rather do is that the
Right.
parents learn how to help themselves and then help each other and do this co-parenting as a unit, so that you are now showing your children a model of how you can get along with someone even if you don't agree with them. Mm-hmm. And that is a life lesson that will help them be successful for many things that they're going to encounter in the future, because many people you encounter in the future, whether it be your own relationship or job or anything you're trying to do, people don't necessarily agree with each other. And you have to learn how to be able to handle that on your side, and how to be able to self-soothe and calm yourself and deal with yourself so you can then effectively deal with another.
Yes. Beautiful. Thank you so much for your knowledge again. It's always great to share space with you. And hopefully, we reach out, touch someone,
Mm-hmm.
someone's, going through this. And what is the best way for our listeners to contact you?
So I have a website, and it is my name spelled out with a PhD on the end of it. So I'm going to spell my name because it's spelled a little bit differently. So it's Cristy Lopez, PhD.com. So my Cristy is spelled CRISTY, and then Lopez, LOPEZ, PhD.com. So there's no H in my Cristy. And then my phone number is 602-323-7824, 602-323-7824. So you can always call and leave me a voicemail. You can look up my website. I'm on the kind of standard social media things, and usually it's a version of either Cristy Lopez PhD or Dr. Cristy Lopez. So if you pretty much probably just Google that, you'll probably come up with the social media that I'm on and my website.
Okay, great. And I'll make sure to add the document that you gave me.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yes, to the website, and that way the listeners can download it.
Yeah, and if for some reason there's any issue or any question that someone had, they can always call me. So that's probably the best way, which is the 602-323-7824. And then, that'd be great if you could put that link on your website. And thank you for having me again. I always love,
it's always a pleasure.
Yeah, talking with you and discussing. And I'm so glad that you're out here and you're doing what you're doing, and you're providing all this great information for people, because you're talking about, and we're talking about things that many people are experiencing and living with, and trying to figure out how to make it through on a daily basis.
Thank you, Dr. Cristy.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Please visit the website at www.leveluptribes.com. And please subscribe to the podcast and share with your family and friends. Be sure to tune in to our next episode. Catch you all next time, my beloved tribes.